The Reverend Robert Tebbutt, Bob to his friends, was the minister of Tilehouse Street Baptist Church in Hitchin, Hertfordshire, from 1966 until his death in 1975. Shortly before he passed away, Bob prepared this presentation on the town of Hitchin and some of its history. His daughter, Mrs. Jill Clough, has kindly handed it to me so that I can share it with you. He recorded the commentary himself on this tape, and we shall hear it in a minute. The script includes suggested music and sound effects. The talk is illustrated by over 100 of Bob's excellent colour slides, which are just as bright and colourful today as they were 40 years ago. To tell its story, the script makes use of the images on the Hitchin mural, formerly beside Sainsbury's store in Brand Street. I've taken the liberty of adding some extra photos of the mural from its present home on the wall of the public library, in order to amplify some of Bob's points. I've also added some historic images from Hitchin Museum's collection to help the flow of narrative. So let's turn back the clock to 1974 and watch Bob Tebbutt's presentation about Hitchin, which he called Sleepy Hollow.
Sleepy Hollow, they call it. As we look from this attractive viewpoint on Windmill Hill, the town is truly seen to be in a hollow. It is protected by the rolling hills of the Hertfordshire countryside, made beautiful by its beech woods and thriving with its fertile fields. But it may not be so sleepy after all. There are several new developments taking place. A new telephone exchange is seen in the foreground, a new office block in the distance, and a new market is being constructed. This does not speak of somnolence, but activity. But all is by no means new. St. Mary's Church has stood here for some 600 years, on a site which has been holy ground for 1200 years. A reminder that people have lived here for a very long time. The Hitchin pageant of 1951, held in the grounds of the Priory, opened with these words.
For 20 centuries, 2,000 years and more, men have lived here, within an arrow's flight from where we stand, in peace and war, in famine, plague and pestilence, in summer sun and winter snow. The whole year through, here have they lived and worked, and played their part in building Hitchin Town.
The map of the centre of the town has altered little during the centuries. Dead Street, now Queen Street, Tilehouse Street, Bucklersbury, the Market Square and Bancroft are centuries old. The building of Hermitage Road, cutting through the garden of the Seabohm family home, heralded a new age of planning and change. We see it here, culminating in the green sward of Windmill Hill. The Hermitage Halls, a cinema now replaced by the post office, the many new shops opened the way for tradesmen and the multiple stores to come into the town. But Hitchin still has its share of family businesses. Hitchcock's for children's wear, Nichols, the drapers, Brookers, their hardware and builders' merchants, Barclays Bank and its close association with Hitchin families, Morris's and Woodbridge's in Church Yard, Andrews, the chemist, Howard's for glass and china, Gatwood's, the jewellers. But Moss's, the grocers, have now been replaced by the international stores, and more chain stores and supermarkets are being introduced to the town. Key Markets is one of these, housed in a purpose-built store, and Sainsbury's is another. It is not my business to discuss the merits or otherwise of these changes, but most would agree that this mural has created a great deal of interest in the new building and has added significantly to the town's collection of murals. At least its meaning is clear, though one may have some doubts as to what this may mean. Or even this one on Church House with its somewhat shattering message. Let's look at the Saints Riz mural more closely, which illustrates several aspects of Hitchin life. And here are three personalities from the past to begin with. Offa, king of Mercia, who ruled most of England south of the Humber, fought battles at Pegston, Purton and Offley from his base in Hitchin, and built a church and monastery here as an expression of his gratitude and devotion in the year 792. And Tovey, the proud standard-bearer of King Canute, who, being enraptured by the discovery of the Holy Cross in his Somerset estate, removed it to Waltham, took off his splendid raiment, and clothed himself in sackcloth, and in a humble voice with tears adored Christ, and gave his land at Hitch for the support of all those who served him. And John de Balliol, the friend of Simon de Montfort, and founder of Balliol College, Oxford. He often stayed at his castle at Dinsley in the parish of Hitchin, and his son of the same name became the disgraced King of Scotland. But whoever the great may have been, they gained their wealth from the fertile land, and in the mural the plough stands for the oldest industry in the district. The same land is ploughed, seeded, and cropped to this very day. It still provides support for the town, and in turn the ancient farmsteads like Maidencroft have looked to Hitchin for their markets and supplies. So too have the picturesque villages which surround the town. The sheep and cattle were bought for sale here in Bancroft, and the 2 stone pillars on the pavement's edge is all that remains of the market. Keeping watch over the farmers and dealers as the cattle changed hands was the man on horseback on the ridge tile of the Brotherhood or Guild House. Have you ever noticed it? It is one of a pair of tiles which were fixed at each end of the building. The other one can be seen at close quarters in Hitchin Museum. The horseman looks north along Bancroft, derived from Bean Field. This most interesting thoroughfare, with its attractive curve, takes the eye along the irregular rooftops of the various historic buildings. Not far away from the cattle market, cereals were sold in the Corn Exchange. Outside, stalls almost filled the square every market day, as the people from the surrounding villages and the town bought and sold their wares. Now, the square is a useful car park. But in the late 1920s, when the slums, which were a disgrace to the town, were removed and St. Mary's Square was established, the market was moved to the new area, which was used for some 40 years for this purpose. Here, people met for a friendly chat. Here, people compared prices of fruit and vegetables. Here, people picked up bargains of every kind. Here, they admired and purchased flowers. But now even this has changed, and a new and sophisticated market has been built on the site of the old St. Andrew's School. The gay stalls are permanently fixed to fulfill the same function today as the market has done for hundreds of years. It was natural that the first industries in the town were connected with agriculture. All these industries are indicated in the mural, such as brewing, coopering, tanning, straw plaiting, with which the making of corn dollies has a connection, and milling. Corn was ground in the picturesque windmills dotted all over the county, like this one at Cromer. Near and within the town, mills were to be found at Purwell, Charlton, and Ickleford. There was Westmill, Portmill, and Grove Mill. And all these water mills were driven by river water. The industry continues at Ickleford and Bowman's Mill near the station. Corn was not the only crop. Lavender was cultivated nearby and distilled in the town for many years. This is the last of the lavender fields, so the industry, which was quite famous at one time, now appears to have gone forever. In the centre of the town, even now, we find Ransome's Distillery with its quaint entrance to the premises in Bancroft, and Russell's the tannery. Both firms founded by families which have made an important contribution to the religious and civic life of the town. As in almost every other town, the emphasis is shifting from agriculture to manufacture, and Hitchin is no exception. There is quite an extensive industrial estate where a number of firms carry on their businesses. Perhaps the most impressive erection is the futuristic gas works, where North Sea gas was processed. These works cost several £1 million to build and were considered to be the very latest, but within 10 years their usefulness is over. Transport is, of course, the key to the growth and development of a town. Hitchin is very near the ancient Icknield Way and also the Great North Road, and these highways have had some influence upon its development. Stagecoaches plied a regular service to London and the north, and Kershaw's coach was among the most popular to do these journeys at the beginning of the last century. Great lumbering springless things these wagons were, writes Hine, that creaked and jolted painfully their slow length along, with canopies lurching heavily to and fro like the shells of primitive stupendous snails. They trundled down Kershaw's Hill before Park Street was developed, and turned into Tilehouse Street. The horses would make their weary way over the last few yards to the blare of the coachman's horn. The coach would pass what is one of Hitchin's oldest private houses, so sympathetically restored in recent years, a glimpse through the archway which leads to the yard at the back, and then over the river by means of a ford it would splash its way towards Bucklersbury, this narrow street with its strange name, on to the Red Hart or the Red Lion, under the archway, where the horses would be changed and fed, and the passengers would themselves be eager to partake of refreshment before a roaring fire in this ancient hostelry. Other coaches might turn up Sun Street, opposite the Priory, and unload at the Sun, another old coaching inn. But the coaches have now disappeared from the Sun Yard, for as the first train steamed into Hitchin Station on the 10th of August 1848, Kershaw's four-in-hand set out on its last journey to London. Ever since then, trains have raced through Hitchin Station, taking passengers from Edinburgh, York, Leeds, Doncaster, Grantham, Peterborough, to King's Cross. These trains have been drawn by smoking steam locomotives, which, like Kershaw's coach, have gone forever, being replaced by diesel-electric engines. These are certainly cleaner and more efficient, but much less exciting. Changes are still taking place as the track is electrified from King's Cross to Royston. The old signal gantries have gone and modern electric automatic signals have taken their place. The cluttered overhead cables are an eyesore, and if there are to be more and faster trains, never again will a return fare to London cost a mere 1 10 halfpenny, as once it did. We take another look at the mural, which suggests a new line of inquiry. The Quaker and the Carmelite. They stand at opposite ends of the Church's faith and practice. Their views are very different from one another, and yet they both had an important part to play in the life of our town. The Friends still have a meeting house here, which was built a few years ago on the site of the old burial ground at the top of Brand Street. Many influential families in the 18th and 19th centuries were members here, and among them the Ransomes, the Seabones, the Tukes, and the Lucases, and their contribution to the character of the town is immeasurable. Hitchin citizens are greatly indebted to Samuel Lucas for his artistic talents. Many local scenes have been preserved in his watercolours, as well as a scene of the marketplace which hangs in the museum. The numerous pen sketches which light up the books of Reginald Hine convey something of the personalities of the Hitchin worthies of his day. Much about the same time as George Fox was travelling up and down the land establishing little meetings of friends, John Bunyan was visiting these parts and preaching to great congregations in Wayne Wood. Some of his relations lived in Hitchin. His Aunt Alice was buried in St. Mary's churchyard in 1614. When John was in prison, his wife and daughter stayed here for a time, and later his son was to leave Bedford to try his fortune in Hitchin. It was of course largely due to his preaching that the Tilehouse Street Baptist Church came into existence some time before 1669. The first meeting house stood on the left-hand side of Ratton Road and was used for some 150 years before the present building was erected in 1844 and the old one pulled down. Tilehouse Street and Walsworth Road Baptist churches, Christ Church, a United Methodist and United Reformed church, continue to make a strong Free Church witness in the town, working in harmony with the other churches in the Council of Churches. However, more than 3 centuries before John Bunyan was born, the Carmelites, who followed the threefold rule of religion, learning, and labour, founded their priory in Hitchin. The settlement became very large and influential, but with the dissolution of the monasteries by Henry VIII, the priory was closed down. The buildings were stripped of all their valuables and sold, and they became the quarry for the town, and many an Elizabethan building in Hitchin was erected with beams and stones from the priory. So very little of the early building is left. Later, the first of the Radcliffes used it as a school, and now it belongs to the Herts County Council Education Committee for residential courses for school children. But the Carmelite Priory was not the only religious house in Hitchin. The Gilbertines had a small community at the Biggin. This was a very strict English order, never so influential as the Carmelites, but suffered the same fate at the hands of King Henry. The house was rebuilt in the 1590s and has been used for various purposes through the centuries, but now it has been converted into flats for elderly ladies. In addition to the Biggin, the more traditional almshouses are Skinner's in Bancroft. These were erected in 1666 for the sum of £261. 100 years later, Warner's almshouses were built in Churchyard. And 200 years later, Minsden, a Herts County Council project, houses many old people in a community under modern conditions. On the compound are also bungalows and warden flats. Among the unusual names we find in this town, like Bucklersbury, Bancroft, Biggin, surely Minsden is the strangest. Where does it come from? One has to go far back into history and about 3 miles south of the town to find an answer. Along this path, the inhabitants of the scattered farmsteads and hamlets of Preston and Langley would go to worship in the ancient chapel of Ease at the top of the hill. Here many a pilgrim would pass on his way to St. Albans. These are the haunted ruins of Minsden, but it's over 300 years since regular worship was offered here. However, marriages continue to be held, and Hine says that many a bashful couple, many a shy widow, were glad of this secluded churchlet in the wood, where the chief witnesses and the sole choristers were the ringdoves cooing in the elm branches, which could be seen swaying to and fro through the yawning holes in the roof. The last marriage took place here in 1738, after a stone fell from the roof and whipped the service book out of the curate's hand. The ruins have been severely desecrated by thieves taking lead and stone. Sadly, vandals still visit the place where the ashes of Reginald Hine are scattered, and the memorial stone has been broken and thrown to the ground. Surely the citizens of Hitchin, who owe so much to him for his writings, ought to be ashamed to leave it like this. Would it that had been true, as was hoped, the haven of a Quaker calm harbours at last your questing soul, for you across the Langley fields the legend bells of Minsden toll. The legend bells of Minsden. There were 3 of them, and even they were stolen in 1725. It is said that the thieves reversed the shoes of their horses on their return journey from the chapel, in the hope that they might not be traced. Are these the hoof prints? As we look over the fields from Minsden, we see Hitchin in the distance. Although Minsden has lost her bells, St. Mary's still has hers, which call the faithful to worship. As in almost every English town, the parish church has a vital part to play. St. Mary's Church is no exception, and is rightly portrayed in the mural. Few churches are more beautiful or more attractively placed. The church stands near the market square and by the river. Let us wander round this house of God by day and by night. So we approach the splendid two-storied south porch, which is quite unusual for a parish church. Here we see the vaulted roof and the genuine Gothic arches meeting in the centre. And as we go inside, our eye is soon caught by this beautifully carved angel screen. This leads into St. Andrew's Chapel, with its modern cross. Behind it is a collection of brasses dating back to the 14th century. Through the new or restored chapel behind the high altar, and round towards the west and the view of the open bell-ringing chamber. At this font, thousands of children through 20 generations have been baptized in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. From this lectern the Word of God has been read day by day, week by week, and year by year. From this wine-glass pulpit the gospel is proclaimed and God's people instructed in the faith. Before this altar, a succession of believers have knelt to be fed with the body of Christ at the communion, bringing spiritual comfort and strength. We now see the church from an unusual viewpoint and note its splendid dignity, and the little window over the quaint chancel arch. So we leave this view of the church and wend our way up the narrow steps of the spiral staircase and look at the bells as we pass. And we move upwards onto the roof of the tower to take our last look at the town from an exciting viewpoint.